and you are in St. Louis, and I'm in Chicago. And what do you do in St. Louis?
I'm the political editor here for KSDK, the NBC affiliate, which means I track and monitor as many of the political and government stories I can from, yes, Illinois, yes, Missouri, in Springfield, in Jefferson City, but especially also here in St. Louis, which can be City Hall in downtown, it can be the county government, and it can be the federal office holders, people in Congress, the U.S. Senate. For example, just today, I got off the line with Cory Booker, the U.S. Senator and presidential hopeful. You might wonder, what? You just said Illinois and Missouri. What's a guy from New
Right.
Jersey doing here? Well, he's got a book sale tour he's doing, and who knows? Maybe he's running for president again in 2028. So you don't see many presidential hopefuls through a pretty red state of Missouri or a pretty blue state like Illinois, but you do get a pretty good glimpse at the cross-cutting, different, divergent political views of the American political spectrum, covering both states.
Wow. So what's it like to meet a national politician?
Well, it's funny. He didn't flinch at some of the harder questions. Some of the, at the local level, you meet a lot of politicians who are still cutting their teeth, finding who they are, finding their voice. And so they're not always supremely confident yet. Once you've weathered the storm of America's most deliberative body and you've run for president and you set the record for the longest speech in U.S. Senate floor history, you're not going to take a lot of heat from that guy whose audience doesn't even vote for you, right? Or at least not yet. So he didn't seem to really. He rolled with the punches. Let's put it that way. But not all of them do that these days.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I just know, I mean, was it for you? Like, is it different than interviewing somebody local? Is there like more pressure?
Different only in that all the preparation is new, and that there's not a relationship already there. So I think that you have to find clever ways to show them early on in the interview. You're meeting this person cold. So you want them to know that you respect what they do and who they are by giving them a little glimpse that you've done your homework, that you're not just showing up unprepared. And I think once they understand, okay, you know what you're doing here, you know what I'm about, they have a level of comfort that they might not have had otherwise.
And do the national politicians, I mean, I met some local ones and state ones, but do the national politicians have a lot of handlers?
Here they did not, but they did have an agenda. Right? It's all about timing. Here, Cory Booker is trying to sell a book in St. Louis, so his publishing company is actually the one that set this up. But they did have his congressional staff. It was. I'll take you behind the scenes for a minute. Before they set up, he was very concerned with the lighting of this shot and everything.
Yeah.
So his staffer, a guy named David in D.C., was just sort of freaking out. In fact, I was laughing. He kept moving the flag and then moving the potted plant and like trying to get it all framed just right because they do care about their image. But for the most part, these people exist in their roles to make their boss look good. So they think they're getting free press and it's low stakes for them. So sometimes you can score a big interview just by paying attention to whose book tour is coming to town.
And have you ever interviewed anybody else on a book tour, or was this the first time?
Let me think about that. I think the answer is probably yes, but I don't know if there were any current political figures. Sometimes it's more like advocates or professors or people that are speaking to a certain topic. But look, the other thing is every time someone's running for office, they usually want that earned media, that airtime. Our thing is, look, you're willing to pay a lot of money to put your message on our airwaves. When you're coming into our corner, you're going to earn it. You're not going to, pay for it necessarily, but you're going to earn it by facing some tough questions. And so I guess that's why they call it earned media, not bought. But I think it's our job just to tighten the screws a little bit. And I think it was Tim Russert who said if they can't handle a few tough questions, how are they going to take some tough votes?
And the thing is that now, especially in today's climate, sometimes the perception of tough questions differs among the audience. Like you may think that's a tough question, but somebody might think it's a low ball or softball.
Well, there's that, and then it also goes the other way. Sometimes people will hear a tough question and think, "Oh, so you oppose my favorite politician? Oh, you must be of the other party or the other political persuasion." And I think the answer really is, once viewers get comfortable with you as a journalist over the long haul, they get comfortable with your work. They see you'll throw fastballs at batters in both sides of the box. Uh, then I think they can learn to appreciate. Okay, this person isn't necessarily out here carrying water for a party that has the same color on their, bumper sticker, but they're here to do a job, which is to look, these politicians act on behalf of all of us. Don't we want to vet and stress test the logic that builds up their idea and their platform? That's what our job is to step in and say, "Hey, hang on a minute, did you think about this?" Because let's face it, the place where our politicians today are supposed to do that rigorous debate, that exercise isn't happening. On the floor of the House, on the floor of the Senate, you don't see much of an exchange of ideas. You largely see that happening through their own megaphones online. And so, to the extent that modern politicians still see value in exchanging and communicating through traditional media outlets, I do think that we have a responsibility there to at least simulate what a debate might have looked like if the Senate or the House were functioning the way it was originally intended to.
Okay, I had no idea. So what are they doing in the legislature when they're meeting?
Well, there's going through the motions, but usually, like, take for example the Senate. They're only going to take a vote on something when they've counted the votes and they kind of know what direction it's going to go. Now, are there still amendment processes that can occur? Yes. But is the act of persuasion happening on the floor of the Senate? You watch and you tell me. It's not usually done there. And so before the cake is finally baked, before the people in power impose their policies on the public, I think that's the space where we step in and say, hang on a minute, before you do that, what's in it for us? And are you sure about that? And it's just a vetting process. And it's also good to bring those viewers who may be new to the idea along for the discussion. Because if they start to realize, oh, wait a minute, the people I put in those positions, that can affect me here too. Okay, now I want to vote next time. It's just, we're all about activating the discussion. And then, we're not here to necessarily oppose any one idea or another, but just to hopefully facilitate the conversation in a way that's interesting and reminds people of that original American promise that we're all equal and that our voices all matter an equal amount if we use them.
Well, do you know when there was a change from arguing on the floor to what's going on now, what you're describing?
That's a great question. I would have. It's funny because when in the 1990s, when Newt Gingrich had his, I'm getting political here. I know we're just talking about broadcasting and reporting, but it's kind of when he had his contract with America and promised those big list of things, and then they came in and had the Clinton impeachment, and things got really personal. I think it was probably around that era. I mean, you think back to LBJ and Reagan and some of those different presidents. I mean, they were graded by the American electorate on their ability to wheel and deal with Tip O'Neill, or like how do they work across the aisle? And now it's not the same. It's, can you vanquish your foes? Can you win just enough votes to have the gavel and then just shove through whatever your policy is? There's not that collegiality or respect happening in those spaces, and we can analyze why that is for the rest of the day. But I think that the hope is that there's still that persuasion is still happening somewhere between public officials, the press, and the public, even if it's not necessarily happening on the floor live on C-SPAN.
Hmm. Yeah, and actually what you're saying, we don't have to get into discussion, but what you're saying is actually reflected in other people's thoughts publicly. People can just look that up because people have been saying that for a while. It used to be more collegial, now it's a different angle. But what's interesting also is that in the past, people had to go through the media to get their message out, and I know that now they can go directly to the people on whatever platform they want.
Right, but how boring is that? I mean, who wants to listen to a politician's ad? You know what I mean? We get enough of those. Like, there are some politicians who can captivate us long enough to be like, okay, that's interesting or that's funny, but those are few and far between. Most of them have an agenda. Most of them want to accomplish a thing, and so they're easy to tune out. As broadcasters, we like to be easy or hard to tune out from, right? Like, we want to be captivating. We want to bring the public into a discussion. And so our job is to be so in tune with our viewers that we know exactly what issue matters to them most. We're kind of that mortar that connects one brick to the other. We're connecting the people to sometimes the people in power and taking their questions to the halls of power and saying, yeah, what about this thing? There is a bit of populism, I think, in journalism. That's not to discredit the experience of experts. We want to listen to them too. But I think that you do have to know that we're broadcasting. The politician speaking to himself in a with a ring light in a TikTok video, that's narrowcasting, right? They're just talking to the people that already like them. We're talking to everybody, we hope, if we're doing our job right.
Well, I mean, you've been around, when digital's been around pretty much your whole career, right?
I think that's fair to say. When I was first coming into newsrooms in 2013, 2014, I mean, Facebook was still pretty new. TikTok wasn't a thing yet. Twitter was popping off. I mean, that was where you could go to get fresh, raw, live. And it was mostly news publishers at the time, or, celebrities or athletes or whatever who were putting out their information. But it was just a way to curate headlines quickly. And the pivot to video that the newspapers all went through, that was kind of happening maybe a few years prior, if memory serves. But I think to your point, the answer is generally yes. That for the duration of my professional career in this industry, yeah, the digital space has been something that we've had to adapt to, and frankly, that's still kind of a work in progress. The goal is it's harder to define. In a regular broadcast platform, you know when your deadline is, you know when your airtime is, and with the internet, you're just kind of like always on, and it's hard to know like when dinner is being served. It's just it's a moving goalpost. It's a never ending hamster wheel that we're treading.
Well, I think it's like a lifestyle because there's somebody else I talked to who's a longtime journalist, and he was saying that you have to just be aware. It's not like you go to work and you leave and that's it. But do you agree with that? What do you think of that?
It depends. I mean, some people. I'll say this: some of the best investigative reporters I know, or some of the best beat reporters I know, they might be always plugged into their beat, but they're not necessarily always plugged into their outlet. So they might be gathering, but they might not always be publishing. And I think it's kind of like a restaurant. How long the chef takes in the kitchen to prepare a thing is probably going to be equivalent to how good it tastes. The quick bite, let me publish something real quick and just get the information out. There's value in that, but I I tend to appreciate the people that take time to really build a story and then serve something up that I would actually pay to eat.
Hmm. And well, what do you think of the digital with people directly communicating with you?
How do you
And are
mean?
they ever rude
Oh,
or
you mean
anything?
like viewers and such?
Yeah, or people who are just online, maybe they don't view, but they follow you and they see the stories, and then instead there's really no shield. They can just directly
Yeah,
confront you.
well, confront is an interesting word. I've seen a lot of that. I guess I'll answer that three ways, and I don't know that I've settled on either one of these different directions. One, I've always tried to stay open to that conversation because I do think part of me thinks there's value in the feedback. It's no different than a newspaper having a letter to the editor or publishing a news. You want to have that dialogue. You don't want to just be talking to at people. You want to be talking with people. On the other hand, I would say I'm not going to hide it. I can be very sensitive to this stuff, and I think that part of me thinks we should be. Even to our criticism, I think that we shouldn't flinch or hide from that. I think that it's good to know, without giving too much credence to the keyboard warriors, you do want to know, like, okay, is this landing? How do people feel about this? Some people say don't look at the comments. I haven't been in these many years doing this. I haven't been able to train myself to stop. I always look at them, at least a taste of them, just to see what is out there. How is this story landing? I am sensitive to it. I want to know how people received it. The last thing I'll say is this, though: don't put too much stock in it. This is my third thing I'd say about it. Every time I did a story the other day where we were exploring how data centers draw down water resources, and you kept hearing all this concern from the public. Well, those data centers are going to drink our water dry. We're not going to have any water left. And here in St. Louis, a shrinking city that was built for 1 million people, we have like 3 times more capacity to pump water out than we have water customers that are. So we could actually use, at least according to the water department commissioner, we could use some of those big data centers because we could use their money to pay for our broken pipes. That's the story I did, right? And in the comments section, I got killed by these people who just hate data centers and they have very strong opinions. And some of them are very smart people. But it was immediately like, well, you must be taking money from the corporations, and how much are they paying you to promote their product? I'm thinking, hey, I saw some of your questions. I thought they were valid. I went to a guy who would know, and I asked him, what about these questions? And I got an answer for you. And now you're crucifying me. So it's interesting. But my answer to that, whenever the criticism gets kind of loud, I stop and I think to myself, who are the 5 people, either in my industry or my field or in some other space, that I admire most? Okay, now I've got my 5 people. And how many of them spend their waking hours of the day in the comments section?
Hmm.
Oh, none of them? Okay, then I kind of recalibrate and I reevaluate just how much those comments are actually worth.
But also sometimes I think that really the comments are really for the view of somebody in marketing or somebody higher up who's looking to see how the news is affecting the audience.
Yeah, I guess. I don't ever, I don't know how other broadcasters do this. I have historically stayed away from ratings discussions. I don't really look at it. I don't know if that's because I'm afraid to see what the numbers are, or because I generally know that our station does really well, because we have a great legacy and there's a lot of journalists who've come here for decades before I got here, and they've built this place into a legendary broadcast outlet. But other than that, I don't look at the week to week or the day to day. I don't know what our. You're right. I'll leave that to the marketing department to look at.
Mm. Yeah, I was gonna say because then you're off the hook, you don't have to worry as much, you know.
Well,
But
I
I was
think
gonna,
I also want
yeah.
to focus on. I want to focus on the content, the journalism of it. I don't want to focus on the business side of it. I'm glad they're doing that, but I feel like I would just get too distracted, and I don't want that obsession to muddy my focus.
Also, you mentioned earlier about the government making a statement and then consumers making statements. How do you know how to balance your sources for stories or and for research for stories?
Can you give an example? Or
Well, how do you know if what the government's really saying the truth or if the company, how do you know who's saying the truth?
well, certainly that's a case by case basis. But you remind me of an old bit of advice that I think Chicago writer Mike Royko might have said, that the news story is not what the press release says it is. The press conference might say this, but there could be a whole lot of other stories in there. Um, Pardon my email notifications going off. I'll see if I can silence that.
It's okay. Yeah, it's okay
But
because we know that you're at work. So,
yeah, I've got the evidence behind me. Um, I think, look, people aren't looking for us to just amplify the voices of the powerful. And when the people in power, I mean, they think about it. Imagine if you or I were to just announce, today I'm holding a press conference. I expect the cameras to show up. Well, how many would, right? These people are so important that they do that once a week or more sometimes. They expect the cameras to be there. And because they're in a powerful position, the cameras show up. Um, so when we get there, we can't assume that whatever they have to say is automatically the news. Um, Again, they have to earn it. Like they do work for us. They do work for the people. And so I think what I'm trying to get around to saying is that uh, they have their thing they want to promote. They have their idea, their headline, their policy, or their ribbon cutting, or whatever it is. But there's always a story in that crowd. There's always somebody there who has a backstory. And by widening the lens and turning the camera away from the stage and talking to other people, you get that connective tissue that brings a community together. You don't have to always point the spotlight at the person who already has everything. I think sometimes people in the audience trust the news better when they see someone on screen that feels and sounds like them. So I think too often we just put the people in power on the mic and forget, like, it's not really about them. What they do is supposed to be about us.
I mean, and also, how do you cover all these? I'm echoing. How do you cover all these politicians in Missouri and Illinois? I mean, back in the day, your legendary station, would it have just been one person covering Missouri?
I don't know what they did back then, and I can tell you that unfortunately, I don't get around to covering all of it. You do have to pick and choose. There is more news than there are newsmen and newswomen these days, and so that creates a whole different dilemma of the choices that we have to make every day, the editorial choices and which stories we pursue, which stories we think can wait. for another day, and you wish you could get to more. I'm told that the advent of artificial intelligence is going to help us get to more news faster. I don't know. I have yet to see that come to fruition, but we can hold out our optimism there, and maybe we'll get better at filing that FOIA more precisely, or uh, tracking down the local minutes of a board meeting faster, and ferreting through all the different sifting information quickly. I, it's hard. It's hard to keep up. I do keep a regular eye on all the different political calendars, those ones that are public. I try to also find the ones that are private. Try to know when the election calendars are up, the legislative calendars are up, and it's just a lot of tracking down, and it's a lot of people reaching out to me. Frankly, I often tell sources I don't know much of anything until someone tells me something. So I just try to encourage them to keep, dropping me a line here and there, and uh, they're often surprised. Like, you didn't hear about this? I'm like, I know it's important to you. It's your whole world, but no, until you called me, I didn't know this was happening. So thanks for reaching out. So yeah, it's just staying in the habit of being connected to the people that are movers and shakers, and trying to know where to look or who to call if you hear something's coming to town. But juggling that calendar, if I'm being honest, is still something I'm trying to get better at, because there's just so much out there. It's hard to know where to point your camera these days.
Is it hard to develop sources?
Yes and no. Um, I would love to hear what your other guests have said about this question. But to me, when I arrived in Springfield in 2017 to start covering the state legislature for WCIA and affiliated Nexstar stations, I will say this. I guess I stumbled into some good luck. I had a string of stories that, yeah, I had a source or two. They had an agenda. And in politics, you do have a lot of sources with a personal agenda. You have to be able to be comfortable with that, understand where they're coming from, understand what level of disclosure you need to give your audience. But then, really, it comes down to, is their information valid? Is it good? Is it true? And I got some sources that gave me some really good tips. And I put together these stories about these empty warehouses that this one longtime guy who used to work alongside the king of clout in Springfield, this old Republican operative, they were taking these vacant warehouses and charging the state of Illinois like these crazy leasing fees just to store a bunch of old paper records inside. It was one of those classic government waste stories. And we did that. It got a lot of outrage. It got a lot of reaction. And you asked me about sources. You're probably wondering where I'm going with this. Once I published that story, the reaction was something I never expected. When other politicians saw, wait a minute, this guy can throw a right hook, he can land a punch. I want him to tell my story. Or in other cases, I've written a story about a person who wasn't necessarily receptive to me, didn't want to talk at first. I had to write the story anyways. We did the story. All of a sudden, guess who wanted to talk afterwards? So it's funny that, at least in politics, this may not be true in corporate spaces or in other private spaces, but in politics, these people react, especially when you can shape the public image around their story. And so if they're just not responding to you and you're trying to cultivate sources, sometimes you have to cover them for a few weeks, a few months, and then all of a sudden you find sources. Or it goes the other way. You see that you've covered someone, and they're like, oh, well, have you considered the other side of this story? And they'll reach out to you with more perspective that maybe you didn't have to start with. I always tell them, if you didn't like the story today, the news continues tomorrow. There's more stories to come.
Well, how do you establish trust with them? Because it sounds like they trust you. Is that your reputation, that you're
Oh,
trustworthy?
well, you can't burn anybody, and you really can't get your facts wrong too many times. They'll live with an honest mistake here and there. But I think if you show an eagerness and a willingness to listen to feedback and criticism, if you show a speedy willingness to correct any errors that may have, because they'll happen, you'll have an error here and there. But if you show, oh my, I'm so sorry, let me fix that. If That's big on trust, right? And then also, I think just in the way we talk to people as humans, people generally have a pretty good BS meter. And if you're working in a space where you're not just calling someone over the phone and working, if you're actually working face to face, I think the human skills, this is big for us TV broadcasters a lot because we're talking with people on camera. Um, they just have to know that they like you. And that can be hard when you're about to, but I'll tell you, it doesn't always work out this way. But some of the people that I'm the hardest on camera have the best rapport with me off camera, and they just enjoy the sport of it. They're like, I know you're just doing your job. Now, sometimes they can get hostile and sometimes they can get tough. Um, and they can even try to get you fired. They can try to turn up we see that sometimes, right? But for the most part, these politicians understand you have a job to do, and the trust part of it. Look, if you can't build your own credit in trust, you're just not going to be in this business very long, right? So I think that they know by the time they get in front of your microphone, they have a pretty good idea what you're about, and your reputation is all we have in this business. So you have to just keep building that. It takes you a lifetime to build it, in an instant to lose it. So you just keep building your credibility through your reporting, and let the rest of it just sort of let the chips fall where they may.
Because I thought there was this one politician that was giving you a hard time.
One,
Well,
which one?
publicly, I don't know,
This,
some guy who was tagging you on social media and twisting your
uh,
work history.
Okay, you're referring about to Senator Josh Hawley. I didn't want to assume. Yeah, for anybody who is not familiar, I don't know the origin of. Well, I guess I do. So when I got to KSDK, um, this was 2022. I was surprised to learn that Senator Hawley, who was a rising star in the Republican Party, I think still is, um, was very available. He would call our state, or his press staff would send an email to our station, and about every week, at least twice a month, and they'd say, "Hey, the senator is available for an interview." With the way they work it, and I don't know how transparent other outlets have been about this. I'm sure they would be happy to. It's just that the senator's office says he's only available in these like 5 minute chunks, and so what they do is they reserve like kind of a TV studio in DC. He sits in a chair. They put an earpiece in his ear. They turn the camera on, and they have like stations 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 and 6 lined up to be in his ear for 5 minute chunks at a time. So he's just hearing us, and then they send us the video later. So we don't even have a live feed of the video. I don't love that because there's a possibility they could control the video and what happens to it, and we don't actually have it live. But whatever. So we would agree to this because it was something close to access. It was something, at least a chance to ask questions. Well, I came in, and really the only thing I knew about Josh Hawley in 2022 when I got to St. Louis was he was the guy who raised his fist on January 6th and had his book deal canceled. And so my first set of questions for him were all about that. Did he regret it? And I got to know him a little better. And I'd ask him questions here. And he had this one bill where he was going to ban uh, insider trading or members of Congress from trading stocks at all. And I thought, well, that's interesting. He was going to call it the Pelosi Act, right? And so I asked him about that. So he didn't like my first set of questions. He did like my second set of questions, and back and forth we would go. Well, I don't know what happened, but one day when Elon Musk had bought Twitter, uh, he was changing something in the settings and the way the website worked, and I wasn't too happy about it. And I made some snide tweet just on my personal Twitter about how I wasn't pleased with the customer service of Twitter these days. Oh, and my mentions and replies were blowing up with all these reply guys who were mad at me for taking a stance about Elon Musk and Twitter. And somebody said, they kind of, and I wouldn't recommend this, by the way, but somebody replied to me and said, "Oh, well, you seem so, what did they say? What a sober and reasoned journalist you are." And I joked back to them, "Hey, I never said I was sober." I'm just like, teasing. And so the next time Josh Hawley came around for an interview, instead of me lobbing the first question at him, he turned the tables and kind of ambushed me. And he said, "What is this, Mark? I see here that you're not even sober. Are you drunk right now?" And I thought in the moment, I'm like, okay, of course he's joking. He must be joking. Like, what, Senator? Have you lost your sense of? Have you no sense of humor? Instead of have you no sense of decency? That old line. But I was surprised to learn that they took and like leaked that video before they could even give it to us. They went and leaked it to Fox News, and then Fox News came and called me looking for a comment, and I'm thinking, really? Like I'm the
Did you give
you're
a
now
comment? Did you
you're
give a
dragging.
comment?
No, no, we didn't give a comment. I don't know. I don't think our management did either. Like we were aware of it, but we're like, okay, do what you're going to do. Like do your worst. But this is silly. Uh, so that was the first time, and then I'm trying to think. There were a couple more stories where I was pretty tough on him. I raised some. I think he was trying to say he wanted to ban Citizens United or ban corporate cash, and I reminded him that he accepted campaign contributions from Citizens United PAC and from some of the corporations that were giving out. Like he built his career, he got to power with that fuel that he's now trying to deprive other candidates of. I don't mind which position you take there. I just wanted to ask him about his consistency or his evolution on the issue. He didn't like that too much. Um, and then there was a question about a big Supreme Court case that his wife's law firm was working on, and it was a big deal. I may get some of the facts wrong here because I'm going off the cuff, but I want to say it was around a it was a gay wedding, and there was a wedding website, and I think they were coming from Colorado. And it was this big case: does the website maker have to make the website for this gay couple? Well, if memory serves, and feel free to fact check me on this, the actual quote unquote couple that wanted the website, after the lawsuit was decided, we learn the couple didn't exist. Some reporter reached out to the one of the men named in the suit, and he's like, "I'm married to a woman, have been." So it was just like a weird thing. It was this big black eye on the judiciary that such a fact error could end up at the Supreme Court. Like, you know how many levels of like motions and filings and hearings you have to go through to reach the Supreme Court, and this was just buried in there the whole time.
Well, and also
So,
another thing is that didn't the lawyers have to meet with them? I don't get it.
well, they were. I think it was the yeah. Like you're asking about depositions, maybe. That could have happened. All good questions, right? And I don't know how that happened, but I did think I have access to a senator who serves on the Judiciary Committee, who appoints justices to the Supreme Court, or at least facilitates their confirmation. Um, and this particular senator is married to the attorney representing this case. And Chief Justice John Roberts, I read, introduced those two to each other, Josh Hawley and his wife. And she's a very established attorney in her own right. So I asked him about, does the Supreme Court have a credibility issue or something like that? And oh, he did not like that question. He thought, well, this is a sexist question, and you should ask the question to her. We had reached out and asked her for a comment. And in fact, we were going to get an interview with her about it. At some point, they canceled the interview, and we never got that interview with her to ask her about it. But at that point, he leaked that video again. This was a second or third time to Fox News, where he's trying to like openly embarrass me. And I'm thinking, okay, this is just getting kind of hostile. What's going on here? Well, the interviews dried up. The offers stopped. The access closed. They still don't even send press releases to anyone in our whole newsroom, which is unfortunate. I've tried maybe a dozen times to turn that spigot back on. I'm giving you such a long backstory to the final thing. So he's out on the campaign trail in 2020.